My ex-wife cheated on me with my golden child brother and gave birth to his baby. Now my family, which always hated me, begs for money after I get promoted. For years my life seemed perfect on the surface: a loving wife, a stable job, and the dream of starting a family. My younger brother Ethan was the golden child, adored by our parents and praised for every accomplishment. I, on the other hand, was the black sheep, always falling short no matter what I did. Still, I accepted my role and tried to find solace in my marriage to Emily, the woman I believed would stand by me when the world didn't. It was one evening when I noticed a shift in Emily. She grew distant, her laughter hollow, her touch fleeting. I dismissed it at first, chalking it up to work stress or the pressures of life. I should have seen the signs: the late-night phone calls, the sudden need to visit her parents. But I trusted her completely, blind to the reality unfolding around me. She was my anchor, my safe harbor, or so I thought. The day I discovered the truth shattered everything. A careless text left on her phone, a message from Ethan, exposed the affair. The words were simple, yet they burned. I can't wait to see our baby. Our baby? The world tilted. My brother, my wife, and now a child. In that moment, my reality crumbled, and I was left standing in the ruins of my life, betrayed by the two people I thought I could trust the most. The moment I read the text, the air felt suffocating, thick with betrayal. My heart pounded, but my mind grew eerily calm, as if I were outside my body, watching the scene unfold. I knew I had to confront her, but I needed clarity, not rage. I waited until she returned home, her face lighting up with that fake smile she wore so well lately. I sat at the dining table, the phone placed in front of me like evidence in a courtroom. Her expression shifted the moment she saw it. A mask of guilt replaced her usual confidence, and the color drained from her face. "Whose baby?" I asked, my voice trembling but controlled. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of her quiet sobs. She admitted everything: the affair, the child, the lies. She tried to explain, to justify, but it was just noise. Every word felt like another stab in the back. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I simply got up, packed a bag, and walked out the door. The betrayal was too deep, too painful to process in that moment. I drove aimlessly for hours, tears blurring my vision, until I found myself parked by a lonely stretch of road. The realization hit me like a tidal wave: my marriage was over. My brother had stolen what little happiness I had, and the child I thought would be mine was his. The days after the revelation blurred together in a haze of pain and disbelief. I moved into a cheap, lifeless apartment, a stark contrast to the home Emily and I had built together. My phone buzzed endlessly with messages and calls from Emily, my parents, and Ethan. I ignored them all. I had nothing to say, and I couldn't bear to hear their voices. The betrayal had severed whatever thin threads of connection remained between us. Eventually, the calls stopped, replaced by a final message from my mother: "We don't want this family torn apart. Please be the bigger person and forgive them, forgive them." The words stung. It wasn't just a plea, it was a command to let go of my pain for the sake of family unity. Ethan was still their golden child, the one who could do no wrong. To them, my pain was a mere inconvenience, an obstacle in their quest to preserve their image of a perfect family. I was officially the villain in their narrative: cold, unforgiving, and selfish. I knew the truth, though. They didn't care about me, they never did. Their loyalty lay with Ethan, and I was disposable. But something inside me hardened that day. If they wanted to side with the brother who destroyed my life, they could have him. I was done seeking their approval, done with their endless favoritism. I was on my own now, and that was exactly how it needed to be. In the weeks that followed, I buried myself in work. My job, once just a means to an end, became my lifeline. I poured my rage, heartbreak, and humiliation into every task, working late into the night, driven by the need to escape my thoughts. My boss noticed the change and, surprisingly, rewarded it. Promotions were whispered, recognition grew, and for the first time in years I felt a sliver of control returning to my life. Emily's betrayal had stripped me of everything familiar, but it also freed me from the constant weight of family expectations. I no longer cared about pleasing anyone but myself. The chains that bound me to their judgment were broken, and I realized I was finally living for myself. I attended industry events, networked with powerful people, and made moves that propelled me forward. With every success, the bitterness in my heart dulled just a little. One day during a quarterly meeting, I was offered a senior position with a hefty raise. I accepted without hesitation. That night, alone in my empty apartment, I stared at the offer letter and felt something I hadn't in months: pride. I wasn't the failure my family had always labeled me. I had built this success on my own without them. The satisfaction was sweet, but I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of my climb. Not long after my promotion, the inevitable happened. My phone rang, and to my surprise, it was my mother. For a moment I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. "Hello," I answered, my voice cool. There was a pause, and then her familiar tone, sweet, but with an undercurrent of expectation, filled the line. "We heard about your promotion," she said. "Congratulations. We're so proud." It was the first time I'd heard those words from her, and they felt as hollow as I expected. Then came the real reason for her call. She explained that Ethan's business had hit a rough patch, and with the baby on the way, they were struggling financially. She danced around the words for a while, but eventually the request came. "We were wondering if you could help out." Just until things stabilize. I almost laughed at the audacity. After all the pain they'd caused me, they now wanted my help? The irony was almost too much to bear. I let her words hang in the air for a long moment before responding. No, the silence on the other end was deafening. She stammered, tried to reason with me, but I ended the call before she could finish. For the first time, I felt the power shift. They had taken everything from me, and now they had the gall to come begging. I wasn't their safety net, not anymore. If they wanted to live with the consequences of their choices, I would let them. After my mother's call, the requests kept coming. My father tried next, his approach more direct. "You have the means now," he said, as if that justified everything. "We're family. Don't let resentment ruin that." His tone was gruff, full of entitlement, and it struck me how little had changed. In their eyes, I was still the backup plan, the lesser son expected to step up when their golden child faltered. I calmly reminded him of the past. "You chose Ethan every time," I said. "You never cared about my well-being, so why should I care about yours now?" He dismissed it, saying I was being petty, that I should rise above it. I felt nothing but disdain. My entire life I'd bent over backward for their approval, but now for the first time I stood my ground. I hung up before he could respond, the finality of it echoing in my small, quiet apartment. Surprisingly, I felt lighter. I expected guilt, maybe regret, but there was none. I was free of their manipulations, their twisted sense of family loyalty. My success was mine alone, and if they wanted to come crawling now, they could choke on their pride. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore, I was my own man. A week later, it was Ethan's turn. He showed up at my door unannounced, looking worn and desperate. Gone was the charming golden boy. In his place stood a man crumbling under the weight of his choices. I didn't let him inside. Instead, we stood in the hallway, the tension between us suffocating. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice strained. "I never meant for things to get this bad." He told me about his failing business, how the baby's arrival had upended everything. His perfect life was unraveling, and he needed my help. "I can't do this without you," he admitted, a plea in his eyes that once would have softened me. "But not anymore." "You did this to yourself," I said coldly. "You took everything from me, and now you want my help. Why would I ever do that?" He had no answer, only silence. I watched as the realization dawned on him I wasn't the same man he'd betrayed. I closed the door on him, shutting out his pleas and leaving him to deal with the mess he'd made. Ethan's visit marked a turning point. The family's desperation turned into bitterness. Word spread through relatives that I was being cruel and selfish. They painted me as the villain, twisting the narrative to suit their needs. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Ethan and Emily were struggling, but I felt no sympathy. They made their choices. My parents began reaching out less often, their messages growing colder. One final email from my mother read, "We're disappointed in you. We thought you were better than this." The hypocrisy was laughable. They had spent years dismissing me, belittling me, and now they dared to play the moral high ground. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Their disappointment no longer had power over me. My success, my happiness, was no longer tied to their approval. I was finally free, and the family that had once loomed so large in my life had shrunk into nothing more than a distant memory. With my family's ties severed, I embraced my new life fully. Work flourished, and I used my newfound freedom to explore passions I'd long ignored. I took up hobbies, travel, writing, even volunteering at local charities. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly living, unburdened by the ghosts of my past. People at work noticed the change. I was no longer the quiet, overworked employee. I was confident, driven, and ambitious. Invitations to social events rolled in, and I made genuine friendships, people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give. Slowly, the scars left by my family's betrayal began to heal. One night, sitting on the balcony of my new, luxurious apartment, I looked out over the city and realized how far I'd come. I was no longer the man clinging to a broken past. I had built a life for myself, one that was vibrant and fulfilling. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Months later, I received an unexpected letter. It wasn't from my parents or Ethan, it was from Emily. She apologized, genuinely this time, acknowledging the pain she caused and admitting that she had been selfish and cruel. She asked for nothing in return, only hoping that I could one day find it in my heart to forgive her. I read the letter twice, emotions swirling. Forgiveness didn't come easily, but I realized that holding on to the hatred only chained me to the past. I didn't reply, but I let go of the bitterness. I didn't do it for her or Ethan, I did it for myself. I deserved peace, and clinging to resentment would only rob me of that. From that moment on, I truly let go. The betrayal that once defined me was no longer the center of my world. I had moved on, stronger and wiser. And as I folded the letter and tucked it away, I felt a profound sense of relief. The chapter of my life defined by pain had finally closed, and I was ready to embrace the future, free at last. With the past behind me, I allowed myself to dream again. At one of the charity events I attended, I met someone, Sophia. She was nothing like Emily. Her warmth was genuine, her laughter infectious, and most importantly, she had no hidden agendas. We struck up a conversation that flowed effortlessly, and for the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of something I thought I'd lost hope. Sophia and I started seeing each other regularly. She wasn't just a distraction, she was a reminder that life could be beautiful again. She had her own painful past, and we bonded over shared stories of betrayal and resilience. There were no games, no pretenses, just two people finding solace in each other's company. Slowly, I allowed my heart to open, cautiously but willingly. As our relationship deepened, I realized that my capacity to trust hadn't been destroyed, just wounded. With her, I found healing. She taught me that love wasn't always pain and sacrifice. Sometimes it was gentle healing and exactly what I needed to truly move forward. Despite cutting ties, I occasionally heard news about Ethan through mutual acquaintances. His business had failed completely, and with no financial safety net, he was forced to move back in with our parents. Emily's dream of a perfect life had crumbled along with him. They were now living a life of scarcity, far from the golden pedestal they once occupied. A part of me wondered if they were truly remorseful, or just bitter that life hadn't rewarded them as they'd hoped. Ethan, once the pride of the family, was now struggling to keep it all together. Yet I felt no triumph in their downfall, only a strange, hollow detachment. Their suffering wasn't my responsibility. They made their choices, and now they were paying the price. My parents, once smug in their favoritism, were now burdened with the son they'd put on a pedestal. I imagined their disappointment as they watched the golden child falter. It wasn't my revenge, it was simply the universe balancing the scales. Sophia and I continued to grow closer, and for the first time I felt ready to introduce someone new into my life fully. She wasn't just a partner, she became my confidant, my equal. But the ghosts of my past haunted me, and one night I confessed everything to her: the betrayal, the heartbreak, and my family's cruelty. To my surprise, she didn't pity me. Instead, she admired my strength. "You've been through hell," she said, "but you didn't let it break you." That's what matters. Her words were a balm to my wounded soul. She didn't see me as a victim but as someone who had survived and thrived. And that's when I realized I truly loved her. In opening up to Sophia, I found freedom. I wasn't defined by my pain anymore. I was a man who had loved, lost, and found love again. And for the first time I saw a future that wasn't clouded by the shadows of betrayal but illuminated by hope. One afternoon, while walking with Sophia, I ran into Ethan by chance. He looked gaunt, weary, a shell of the man he used to be. He didn't speak at first, just stared at me with hollow eyes. Finally, he broke the silence. "I lost everything," he said quietly. "I don't know what to do." I looked at him, expecting to feel anger or satisfaction, but there was only pity. "You'll figure it out," I replied, my voice devoid of malice. Just like I had to, there was no need for revenge. Life had already delivered its lessons. Ethan didn't argue or beg. He nodded, defeated, and walked away. It was the last time I saw him. That encounter left me surprisingly at peace. I had no desire to kick him while he was down. The past no longer had any hold on me. I was free, and seeing Ethan like that only solidified my decision to move forward with grace, not bitterness. The wedding was simple, just as we wanted it. No grand spectacle, no elaborate guest list, just the people who truly mattered. Sophia wore a soft, flowing dress, her eyes glowing with happiness as we exchanged vows. Standing there, holding her hands, I realized how far I had come. This was love, pure and unburdened by the past. There were no ghosts at our wedding, only the promise of a bright future. Our friends, who had become my family, toasted us with warmth and genuine affection. For the first time, I felt surrounded by people who saw me for who I truly was, not the scapegoat or the failure my family had painted me to be. As Sophia and I danced under the stars, I whispered my gratitude to her. She had given me more than love, she had given me peace. That night I didn't think of Ethan, Emily, or my parents. They no longer haunted me. All that mattered was the life I was building with Sophia. And as we fell asleep in each other's arms, I felt a quiet joy I hadn't known in years. With my career flourishing, I found myself in a position to give back. I started mentoring younger colleagues, many of whom struggled with personal challenges of their own. I shared my stories sparingly, only when it felt right, but the lessons of resilience and self-worth resonated with them. Helping others heal became a new source of purpose for me. At first I didn't think much of it, but one day a young intern named Max approached me with tears in his eyes. "You changed my life," he said. "I thought I was stuck, but you showed me I could move forward." His words humbled me. I wasn't just building my own future anymore, I was helping others find theirs. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about transforming it into something meaningful. I realized that the pain I had endured wasn't wasted. It had shaped me into someone who could guide others out of their own darkness. And that, more than any professional achievement, became my greatest success. Months after my wedding, my parents reached out one last time. It was a letter from my mother, the tone surprisingly subdued. She acknowledged the hurt they had caused, though she didn't fully apologize. Instead, she asked for peace. "We're getting older," she wrote, "and we don't want to leave this world with bitterness between us." I stared at the letter for a long time, unsure of how to feel. There was no anger, no desire for revenge, but I also felt no need to reconcile. I realized that forgiveness didn't have to mean rekindling old ties. I could let go without inviting them back into my life. I sent a brief response. "I wish you peace," I wrote. That was all. No anger, no further explanation. It was enough for me, and perhaps it would be enough for them too. Ethan faded from my life entirely, though I occasionally heard whispers about him through distant relatives. His business never recovered, and neither did his relationship with Emily. They were no longer the golden couple, and the family's pride in him had withered away. I wondered if he ever thought about me, if he regretted what he had done. But the truth was, it didn't matter anymore. His fate was no longer my concern. I had spent too many years trapped in the web of his betrayal, and I refused to let it define me any longer. One day I realized I hadn't thought about him in months. It felt like shedding a heavy coat I had worn for too long. I was free. And that freedom tasted sweeter than any revenge ever could. Sophia and I welcomed our first child, a daughter we named Lily. From the moment she was born, I knew my life had changed forever. She was perfect, with Sophia's warm smile and a laugh that filled the room with light. Holding her in my arms, I felt a surge of love so overwhelming it brought tears to my eyes. I promised myself I would be the father I never had present, supportive and loving. I would never make Lily feel like she was second best or unworthy of love. Every moment with her was a gift, and I cherished it fully. Watching her grow, I realized that she was the ultimate testament to my journey. She was born not from the ashes of betrayal, but from the love and hope I had rebuilt with Sophia. She was the proof that life, even after unimaginable pain, could be beautiful again. Life settled into a joyful rhythm. Work thrived, my relationship with Sophia deepened, and Lily grew into a curious, spirited child who filled our home with laughter. I no longer looked back with regret or anger. The past was a distant memory, one that had shaped me but no longer defined me. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching Lily play in the yard, Sophia joined me. "You've come so far," she said, taking my hand. "Do you ever think about them anymore?" I considered her question and smiled softly. "Not really," I admitted. "They're part of my story, but they're not the whole story." And that was the truth. I had moved beyond the pain, the betrayal, and the longing for approval. I had built a life filled with love, purpose, and peace. And as I watched my daughter chase fireflies, I knew that the best chapters of my life were still ahead of me. A year after Lily's birth, I received an unexpected letter, this time from Emily. It was brief but sincere. She expressed her regret for the pain she had caused, apologized for her actions, and admitted how much she had hurt me and the rest of the family. There were no excuses, just a raw and vulnerable admission of guilt. Reading her words, I felt nothing but a quiet sense of closure. I hadn't expected it, Nor did I need it. I was in a place where her apology didn't weigh on me anymore. I had already forgiven her, not for her sake but for my own peace of mind. Holding on to resentment would have only hurt me, but letting go had given me freedom. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't need to. I had moved on, and in a way I could thank her for helping me find the strength to build the life I had. She had been a chapter, but now it was time for me to keep writing my own story. Over time, my experiences began to take shape in my mind as something more than just personal healing. They became a source of inspiration. I started writing a book about overcoming betrayal, finding strength in adversity, and the power of self-worth. At first it was just a way for me to process everything, but soon it grew into something much more meaningful. The book became a modest success. It resonated with people who had faced similar challenges: heartbreak, family betrayal, and the struggle to reclaim one's life. Letters poured in from readers who shared their stories, thanking me for showing them that they weren't alone. The book didn't just heal me, it helped others heal too. What started as a cathartic journey for me became my legacy, proof that even the deepest wounds can lead to something beautiful. I was no longer just the victim of betrayal, I was the author of my own redemption. As the years passed, Sophia and I continued to build a life that was meaningful and fulfilling. We traveled to places we had always dreamed of, experiencing different cultures, tasting new foods, and creating memories that would last a lifetime. Our daughter Lily grew up surrounded by love, laughter, and the kind of stability that I had longed for as a child. One trip that stood out was our visit to Greece. We walked through ancient ruins, took boat rides in the Mediterranean, and spent long evenings watching the sunset together. It was during that trip that I realized how far I had come. I was no longer the broken man clinging to the past. I was someone who had found peace, joy, and purpose. Traveling the world wasn't just about seeing new places, it was about embracing the freedom I had fought so hard to achieve. Each new experience was a reminder of how much I had grown, how far I had come, and how much more there was to see. When my parents passed away, it was a quiet affair. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic goodbyes. They had been absent from my life for so long that their passing didn't bring the flood of emotions I might have expected. I had already mourned the loss of our relationship years ago, and now there was only a sense of finality. I attended their funeral, but not out of obligation. I went because I had to, because closure, even in the form of a simple goodbye, was part of my journey. I stood by the gravesite, surrounded by distant relatives who hadn't been part of my life for years, and realized something profound. I had finally let go of the past. I was no longer the son they had rejected. I was a man who had built his own life, and no one could take that away from me. In the years that followed, my life continued to unfold with purpose. Sophia and I raised Lily, teaching her the values of kindness, integrity, and strength. We watched her grow into a thoughtful, compassionate young woman, and I couldn't help but marvel at how different her childhood was from mine. My work continued to thrive, and I found new ways to give back to my community. The mentorship programs I had started expanded, helping countless others rise above their circumstances. I wasn't just living for myself anymore, I was living for the future. Looking back, I realized that my greatest victory wasn't in professional success, or even personal triumph, it was in the way I had chosen to live. I had broken free from the toxic patterns of my past, built a life full of love and peace, and created a legacy I could be proud of. As I watched Lily graduate from college, I saw a reflection of everything I had worked for, a life not defined by betrayal, but by the love and strength I had fought so hard to find. And as I stood there, watching her take her next steps, I knew that my story wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all. Now, for the next story. My best friend of over 10 years, boyfriend of 3 years, has confessed to having strong feelings for me. My best friend and I have known each other forever, and I love her with all my heart. We're extremely open and honest with each other, about as close as two people can be without being romantically involved, though it's a running joke that we're wives. Because of this and because of her meticulous nature, we've previously run over random scenarios, and what we'd like the other person to do in said scenario. Things like if a guy asked one of us out via the other one, if we both got feelings for the same person, even things like if the other one died. One of these was the dreaded "if I had a boyfriend and he had feelings for you" scenario. The potential for this to happen has come up a few times in conversation over the years in varying degrees of seriousness, and while we agreed that it'd be awful and sucky, we didn't agree on what we would want to know in the situation. I would always, under any circumstances, want to know, and she wouldn't. She has been adamant about this every time it comes up, and no matter what question I hit her with or alteration to the scenario, she always made it 100% clear that she would never want to know. About 3 years back, she starts dating guy. He's been around, he's kind of one of those extended members of our group, so we both know him and I'd never thought much about him other than that he seems cool, nice, etc. Because of his proximity to her, he joins the rest of our friends group, and he hits it off with all of us. The boys love him, the gals are happy for best friend because he's genuinely perfect for her. And most importantly, she is over the moon. All she's ever wanted is to be in love, it's a dream of hers, he treats her and other people in general with the utmost respect. Him and I get along well. We don't hang out the two of us, but we'll chat a bit, very basic stuff about music, our jobs, etc., and hang out the three of us. He had this small talk with some of our other friends too, and I always thought it was great because he was taking an interest in her life and the people around her. I've always been a bit of the odd one out in my group of friends. I was put up a few years in school, and because of that all my friends are just a little older than me. And I've been the baby of the friends group my whole life. Most of us went from high school to the same university. I've also always had a general disinterest in dating. I've had interest from guys, but I'm a bit of a daydreamer, obsessed with my chosen field, and my future plans do not involve children, and perhaps not even marriage. The idea of love always appealed to me, but I've just always been happy within myself and never in any kind of rush. Because of this, there was a running joke in our friends group about me dying alone surrounded by nothing but dogs, etc. Harmless fun. And Guy joins in on these jokes as well over time. I noticed as he became closer to the group, he always seemed very interested in my love life, and encouraged me to pursue my dreams and take my time. Best friend always did the same. I never thought much of it. Until about 4 months ago I met a guy 25M who completely sweeps me off my feet. We'll call him Max, because that's his name. Totally unexpected. Just swooped in and we've had a very charming fairy tale-like romance. Because of my inexperience in relationships, I've spent a lot of time talking to best friend about all the feelings I've been having, etc. She's happy for me, gives me advice, yada yada. Guy's in the same room when this is happening a lot of the time, so sometimes gives his input. Everything is perfect and awesome. But then Guy starts acting weird. We'd be having drinks as a group and I'd be telling a story involving Max and he'd suddenly get really weird. He'd be warning me, telling me completely normal stuff Max does is red flag. Max spontaneously showed up to take me out on a date, stargazing late at night. I love surprises. And I study work in astronomy, and Guy's going on about how dangerous it was for me to go alone, blah blah. Guy's always been friendly, supportive, nice to and about everyone. So much so that best friend starts to doubt Max and his intentions purely because Guy's a great judge of character. While all my other friends think Max sound great, and laugh Guy off as bizarre. During this time, Guy reveals to me he's going to ask best friend to marry him. Hurry. Totally awesome. Have to keep it a secret for now. But I'm really pumped for them. He told me so he could get advice on the ring, and how she'd like to be proposed to. All good. It finally reached the tipping point when Max met my friends, and they all really liked him. Everyone seems to be getting along and Max and Guy are chatting to his side. Suddenly Guy just puts his glass down hard on the table and storms out of the bar. Best friend is all wet and goes after him, and I go over to Max to see what's up. Max looks super shocked. He tells me Guy was doing a bit of the big brother routine, which he did get from a few of the guys in the group. Max said from most of the others it was playful banter type stuff, but Guy was a lot more serious. The point where he got up and stormed out was because Max had been talking about how serious he was about me. No one had to worry. He would never dream of hurting me, etc. Later on, Max suggested maybe Guy was jealous or something, but I was pretty disbelieving of that. I cannot stress enough that Guy has never done, or said, anything that ever seemed like he had feelings for me. He's treated me the same as anyone else in our friends group. The only difference being he's gotten to know me more because I spent a lot of time at best friend in his place. Deciding I had enough, I messaged Guy. First I asked him if he was okay, then I went on to say that I hoped everything was cool between us all. The following conversation reads, him, it's not cool. I don't trust that guy. Me, do you mind if I ask why not in specifics? No one else got bad vibes. Even invited him to the beach tomorrow. Him, he looks at you funny, I can't explain it properly. You've known me a while, you know I have your best interests at heart, trust me on this. Me, I understand that you can't help it if you get bad vibes, but no one else does. I'm sorry, but I'd need more than trust me to go on. Regardless, while I appreciate your concern, I'm capable of making my own mistakes and I do not think this is one. It'd really mean a lot to me if you could try and get along with him to make it easier to fit in. I plan on keeping him around for a while, and best friend wants to do double dates and stuff, so you're going to run into him eventually. Him 1. Double date sounds lame. 2. Even if they didn't, I don't want him to come. Me 1. Take that up with your lady too. Do you really not like him that much? Him okay. He seems alright but kind of weird. How can a theater kid be so alpha? It's more that I'm jealous. Me, I resent the notion that theater guys can't be manly, but also I know the group is really tight, but everyone really likes you, you've been one of us for years now. Max got a lot of attention tonight, BC, he's the new guy. I'm sorry if you felt excluded, but I promise it's really not like that. He didn't reply for a while, and then sent this. I'm not of that. I've been thinking very carefully about how to phrase this message. I don't want you to think I don't love best friend, because I do. Very much. But I am also in love with you, and have been for about 2 years. When I realized I thought about breaking up with best friend, but you were always so in your own world I thought I'd never have a shot anyway, especially if I was your BFF's ex. I pushed it down, lived with it. It was hard, it sucked. I got over it, kind of. I thought that if I couldn't be with you then at least I could have happiness with best friend and be near you. Then, you met Max, and watching you start to fall in love with him is the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. I know this is cliché and dramatic, I know it's fucked, and I should just not say any of it, but I literally feel sick when you talk about him. I cannot tell you how much I wanted to hit the guy last night, and then how bad I felt about it when I realized he was actually a decent guy. I think the only thing worse than you being with another guy is you being with another guy I actually like. Sorry for offloading onto you, I know it's unfair to do this now. I do love best friend. You know I do. I want to marry her. I would rather you didn't tell her. But what happens next is up to you, I guess. Me, if this is a joke, it's not funny. Can you please tell me the truth? Him, sorry, but that is the truth. What are you going to do? I haven't sent him anything back after that. He sent a few more messages asking what I was going to do. I replied to say I was thinking. Small edit, since posting this he sent quite a few more messages asking what I was going to do. I told him I still hadn't decided overall, but also made it clear I don't reciprocate his feelings. I am gutted, and how I feel is nothing compared to how best friend would feel if she knew. I want to tell her so badly. I know if I was in her shoes I would want to know. The last thing I'd want to do is marry a guy who wasn't honest with me about something like that. But it was the beginning of this year that we last joked about this exact scenario, and she was still adamant she wouldn't want to know. I know it's not my fault, but I still feel terrible. I'm questioning if I ever did anything to bring this on from Guy, and if I can even go on acting like he never said anything. His feels are not reciprocated at all, never have been. Max was with me when I got the message and has been very supportive, if a little miffed towards Guy for obvious reasons. Send help. Best friend and I often run scenarios about real-life situations and what we'd want in said situations, if that makes sense. We've talked extensively about what we'd want the other one to do if their boyfriend got feelings for them. And best friend has always said, as recently as the beginning of this year, that she wouldn't want to know if it happened. Best friend meets Gaia 3 years ago. He integrates into our friends group, gets along with everyone, is just generally a cool guy. Life goes on, they move in together. I'm thrilled for her, he's all she's ever wanted. I meet what seems like my dream guy. Everyone is happy for me, except Guy, who seems super standoffish and weird about it. I don't think much of it. Guy wants to marry best friend and tells me about it to get advice. Awesome. Eventually it snowballs after Max and Guy meet for the first time to Guy telling me over messages that he's in love with me, but still wants to marry best friend and just be in love with me from the shadows. His feelings for me are not reciprocated in the slightest. I need to talk about this, Reddit. Should I tell her? Should I just keep it to myself? I'm furious with Guy. I feel terrible. I feel awful for best friend. I don't know if I can look her in the eye as she marries this person. I don't know if I can let her marry someone and without her knowing all the facts. I'm overwhelmed, please. Just give me some advice. Comments. Comment 1. Oh my God, I had a guy do this to me. He was a really good friend of mine and my partner's. Asked me out of nowhere if I'd date him instead, one day. Then a bit later, because I was in my very early 20s and didn't know boundaries, sent me this long story he'd written about him and I together sexually. It was written in a manner that indicated assault was involved. Genuinely extremely disturbing behavior. I'm lucky that the guy I had to deal with was in Florida and I'm in Australia. I can't imagine how stressful it was for Oop to deal with this in person. Comment 2. Ladies, gents, whatever the formality for they them is, if your partner has a file on one of your friend S, or really anyone for that matter, That isn't expressly for legal purposes. Tell that person and leave. Baffled once again by the human brain. Update. So there were lots of conflicting opinions on what to do, and a lot of you had really good reasons behind those. However, there were consensus which seemed to be that one. This sucks and there's no ideal solution. And 2. Everyone seemed on board with the letter idea which was suggested by a few people. The gist of it was that I should write a letter and put the screen caps, etc. I took into it, and then offer the information to her again. That way she would have some more agency to choose whether or not she wanted to know. I have to say, letting her know there was something to know kind of felt like I was forcing her to choose to open it, but, well, here's what happened. I made the envelope and went to her place while Guy was working just to hang out. Pretty usual stuff. Read it. I'm not a terrible actress, but this woman knows me so well. She opened the door to let me in and immediately asked what was wrong, and to my everlasting shame I immediately burst into tears. Super pathetic of me, and not ideal. After I'd composed myself, I started saying what I'd been practicing in my head. Pretty much. That there was something we'd talked about a lot in our scenarios that had happened, and she had always said she wouldn't want to know, but I wanted to give her the option. I gave her the letter. Then, without even opening it, she also started to cry, which made me start up again, which was kind of okay because the ridiculousness of us both just standing in her living room sobbing all over each other made us laugh a little bit. A lot of people had guessed she had noticed or had some kind of idea of Guy's feelings, and they were absolutely right. But it's weirder than even that. I genuinely can't believe I'm explaining this. It's just weird. I don't know. Best friend had thought Guy had a harmless little crush on me. The kind people in relationships just get sometimes. But when he didn't talk to her about it, she started to feel uncomfortable, and she did something she shouldn't have, but you know how it goes. She snooped. She snooped on his laptop months ago, and found a file with my initials on it buried amongst a bunch of other stuff. She went and got his laptop and gave it to me to read while she read my letter. Inside it were stories he had written, like fan fiction, about the three of us living like a kind of poly-relationship lifestyle where we were his wives. Some of it was sexual stuff which, I think I could understand it better if it had just been sexual fantasies, but there were also really long documents about our lives together. And it goes deep too. There was a whole plot line about him trying to convince me to have kids, love them. But I'm child-free and everyone around me knows it. There were loads of stories, all different lengths. I didn't read all of it, just kind of like skim read them with my mouth hanging open. It's so hard to explain. It was really bizarre to read about myself like that. There were newer documents best friend hadn't read too. Best friend goes on to tell me that she hadn't minded because she was in all the stories as well, so she's reassured in his love for her. But obviously me being part of their life in that way isn't her ideal, and she was disturbed by the way he'd spoken to me in the messages from the other day, and the ones he's sent since. I asked her loads of questions, including if she felt safe, and she said she does. I asked her what she wanted to do, and she said she wanted to leave him. She also apologized for not telling me, and while it doesn't sit well with me that she didn't, because of what happened after this, I've basically forgiven her, put any talk of that on hold. She doesn't need that now, and I've been so relieved she wasn't mad at me for bursting her bubble, and concerned for her, that it seems very secondary. Of all the things I expected to happen during my visit, it was none of that. So then the conversation switched to me being worried about her safety, because while he doesn't seem dangerous, this is very obsessive, and he's clearly been upset by his fantasy becoming further from reality with Max in the picture, and now this. I'm a little anxious about Max's safety too. I can't tell if I'm being reasonable or paranoid. She assured me tenfold that she feels completely safe, he's never done anything other than this that's red flag, but that she still wants to leave, and she's very cautious by nature, so she's taking some precautions. She got up and went to pack her bags, and started giving me typical her business-like instructions on the things she wanted me to grab from around the house. She filled up her suitcases, and I filled up a box of her personal stuff. Then she wrote a note for Guy explaining that she didn't think they should be together anymore, and she would only talk with him about it over messages, or in person a few days from now in a public place, she assured me. So this is when I did something I maybe shouldn't have. I don't know. I carry a pen drive on my keychain. I told her that I wanted to take copies of the stories because if anything happens, even if she doesn't think it will, it's important that there's something we can use to prove his obsessive behavior. She said fine, so I now have a pen drive full of fanfiction and playlists about myself, my best friend and her ex. I'm not going to lie and say I'm not tempted to read them. Sheer morbid curiosity. But I've resisted so far. We went to my place first while we thought of what to do next, and her emotions were understandably all over the place. After I got a call from Max and filled him in, he said to come stay with him since Guy doesn't know where he lives. Best friend preferred to stay at a nearby hotel, which we used my card to pay for. And after I hovered over her anxiously as she settled in, she eventually said she wanted to be alone, which isn't unusual for her when she's upset. I've been to visit her, and she's been sending me messages the whole time, so I'm feeling pretty confident about where her head's at. Sad, but coping well considering, but still just general worriedness. I'm staying with Max until things settle down. I've gotten and am still getting messages from Guy. I have been since about 5 p.m. that night. And it's been 2 nights since then. They're very, I just want to talk messages. Not aggressive or anything like that. I was going to block him on everything, but best friend asked me not to, because she's worried about his mental state. As a side note, I'm not bashing poly relationships by any means in this post. That is most definitely not the thing about this I find weird and bizarre. You do you. I gave her the option of the letter. Turns out best friend knew the whole time, because she snooped on Guy's laptop months ago, and found loads of stories he wrote of the 3 of us living some kind of fictional paradise where we're his wives. I know. What? She doesn't feel unsafe but decided to leave him. And because of the weirdness of the situation, she's taking the appropriate precautions. I put her up at a hotel using my card, because she's not sure what Guy has access to, etc. She seems as good as can be expected, wants to be alone but is still talking to me over Messenger about everything. I'm staying at Max just in case. Guy is trying to talk to me and to her, but the only responses he's gotten are to read the note she left him again. Lastly, thank you so much to the people who commented, especially the ones who wrote a lot and gave me such good advice and just sent general good feelings my way. Now, for the next story. Wibta, if I drop out of a friend's wedding after being excluded from the bachelorette party? I-25F am currently being pushed back and forth with my choice, and I thought the lovely people of Reddit might be able to rein me in. I am currently 13 weeks pregnant, and my friends around me have all been very happy and excited for me. However, my childhood friend 25F, let's call her Lisa, stonewalled me since I announced at 8 weeks. I had assumed it was wedding stress, but now I'm second guessing this. In the weekend I was scrolling Instagram and I came across a post where she had thanked everyone for coming to her bachelorette. Photos of it's the girls and her smiling in the middle, and I sorta sat there shocked. At first I tried to be mature and just let it go. But this was a girl I grew up with. She was a bridesmaid in my wedding party, and I'm an honorary bridesmaid for her. She's not having a wedding party. In the end, I guess hormones took over and I ended up reaching out to her. At first I went, "Oh, looks like fun." And she replied that it was, and after a tub of ice cream and a good sob I reached out and went, "Hey, sorry to be this person, but why wasn't I invited?" She immediately messaged me back with the response. TBH, the whole day was centered around drinking wineries and heading to town after, and I'm not sure you would have enjoyed being around all of us drunk AF, especially cause you're pregnant right now. I get that an invite would have been nice regardless. But in all honesty, I just wanted to keep it very small. I'm really sorry you feel that way, but I don't want to make this a big thing. BC, I've already had a shit week. I tried to respond with, "Hey, thanks for getting back to me, but I'm still upset cause the day is about you and I wanted to be there to celebrate you," and then she rung me and just asked me to not make this a big thing once again. And she sounded incredibly annoyed, and like the doormat I am, I dropped it. After thinking this over for the past few days, I'm feeling very hurt and heartbroken. This was a girl I grew up with and loved and supported through a lot of shit. I've helped her plan and prepare a lot of her wedding, so to suddenly get iced out like this, I'm feeling a certain way. Comments. Comment 1. I'm glad Op can finally admit the friendship is done. That's the hard part about growing up, is not all friendships grow with you. Besides, as a soon-to-be mother, Op doesn't need this added stress and drama in her life. Sounds like the friend's marriage is destined to be a toxic one. I also cannot understand why the friend thought it was best to lie to all the people she didn't invite to her bachelorette. Especially the excuse she used towards Op. Like, why choose the most hurtful option? Comment 2. Not taking any of the blame off the bride, but I'm wondering if there isn't a whole other story going on here. Maybe groom's family, specifically Sil, took over everything, and that's why it didn't feel like the bride's day. How many times do we see a bride on here absolutely beside herself because Mill or Sil took over everything and the groom has just let them do it? They know what they're doing. Don't make a big deal out of it. Instead of standing up for his partner. I wonder if we're not going to see a just normal about this wedding. Update 1. Hi. Hope this is allowed, but you were all so wonderful and helpful, and turns out I got an update sooner than I expected. So I haven't heard from Lisa, that I expected. What I didn't expect is a friend of Lisa to get in touch with me. Let's call her Sarah. I knew of Sarah and spoke to her a few times at events we attended together, and she was one of the girls with myself went wedding dress shopping for Lisa. She was also a friend I noticed wasn't at the bachelorette, which was a surprise anyway. And at first she was doing a "Hey, how are you?" and we did polite small talk blah blah. Until she finally went, "So are you?" as pissed off and mad as I am at Lisa up. Immediately I was slightly shocked, as the few times I had met Sarah she was very, I guess, demure. That opened the floodgates of information and she told me everything she knows. So what I didn't put in the post is I actually waited 2 days before messaging Lisa about the lack of invite. Turns out 3 of Lisa's friends who also weren't invited hit her up immediately after she posted on Instagram asking why they weren't invited. Turns out these girls absolutely chewed Lisa alive, and my confrontational was soft, and finally it was revealed what actually happened, and now I'm even more confused. So Lisa admitted to Sarah that her sister-in-law planned the bachelorette, and just decided she was only going to invite the friends she knew. So Lisa's usual group of 8-10 friends, including me, got narrowed down into 4, and Lisa decided not to correct her sister-in-law and just went with it, not realizing how many people she would be upsetting with not inviting people. Apparently once people started attacking her, Lisa buried her head in sand and started making up lies to everyone on why they weren't invited, and using the same excuse of "don't make this a big deal." Until everyone realized the reasons were bullshit and called her out for it, and the real truth came out. Sarah has informed me the girls who weren't invited have all pulled out of the wedding. Their partners included, because they got the same annoyed response from Lisa before she told the truth, and they all thought they didn't deserve that. Then she finally asked me what Lisa told me, and I went deathly quiet on the phone before finally admitting she used my pregnancy as excuse, which then started poor Sarah on another rant of anger on how Lisa could say that to me when I'm pregnant. Anyway, we ended the call and she hoped we could get coffee sometime, so I think I've made a friend. So that's the update. This pregnant lady is very confused. And I'm currently the #1 buyer of ice cream at my local dairy. Update 2. I finally shared what had happened with my mum. And first, Mum was so upset for me, but also gave me an "I told you so" op. "You are too much of a doormat, thanks Mum." But she then said I have a big heart, and sometimes people tend to use and abuse it. Once again, thanks Mum. Anyway, Mum then gave more tea, more gossip. So apparently while Lisa has been telling people that she's paying for her wedding out of her own pocket, turns out a big fat lie. Lisa's mother had been sending her money, and from what my mother told me it was a decent chunk of change. How do we know this? Well, Lisa's mum went to my mum upset, because one thing I forgot to notice is Lisa's mum wasn't invited to the bachelorette party. Context for people outside NZ. We don't have bridal parties, so usually what people do is the older generation gets invited to like dinner, and then the younger girls go out and party if you have a piss up. If you don't have a piss up and just do a more chilled bachelorette, then mum will be there the whole time, like mine. So Lisa's mother was distraught because she had been sending Lisa a decent amount of cash, had been told she wasn't allowed to give her opinion about anything to do with the wedding, and then wasn't invited to her bachelorette. And Lisa's mother is honestly a nice lady, so to hear that, it kind of broke my heart. And if I had known Lisa's mother was sending money, I would have told Lisa to pull her head in. My mum then had to break the news about why I wasn't invited to the bachelorette, and Lisa's poor mother was mortified. So that's the update. Is it even an update? I don't know. I'm just very sad at this point because I don't know where my friend has gone. If she's there anymore. Is this a Bridezilla moment? I don't know. My ice cream journey though, I read everyone people have been loving this pregnancy lady's carving, so allow me to indulge. Recently I tried the Ben & Jerry's banoffee flavor and it was very good. I wish the caramel swirl was mixed throughout all the ice cream, but beggars can't be choosers. And I had the most amazing strawberry sorbet the other day. Honestly so good I almost asked the ice cream shop for a tub of it, but I had self-control. New update. Just want to give a big thanks to everyone on Reddit for coming along on this wild journey with me. You have all helped me not go insane this past month. On to the update. So I attended the wedding. I know you can all boo me in the comments, but I was leaning towards not going until I spoke to my mom, who ultimately told me this would be a nice way of closing our chapter of friendship. I could walk away with my head held high. Later she told me that also Lisa's mom begged my mom to convince me to attend. I attended with my husband and I immediately noticed the vibe and aura was completely off. People of Reddit who are married who will understand me, weddings feel like love. This didn't. This was technically an Instagram picture perfect wedding, but it could have been anyone's wedding. It didn't feel personal. My friend barely smiled unless it was photos, her vows were robotic, and the mo was useless. That was my biggest pet peeve. It is not that hard to see the bride's dress needs fluffing, or she needs a drink, and even I'll admit I felt no joy watching speeches, and how everyone spoke about the groom and threw something in for the bride at the last second. The bride acted like we were good, like there was no beef, like the bachelorette thing never happened. I felt strange, I didn't like it because I know her, and she isn't able to hide her emotions and she wears her emotions on her sleeve, so I think she genuinely thinks nothing is wrong between us. She pulled me aside and said how she loved and appreciated me, and how she was excited to be an honorary auntie, and kept touching my belly and blowing kisses at it. I left the wedding feel a lot of emotions. I know I'm hormonal right now, and I feel everything, but I don't know. But I can sit here and admit the friendship is done. I don't think I can look at her the same after everything I learned talking to my mother, and with how I was treated. The chapter is closed. Then the bridesmaids thing, I can look back somewhat fondly on our childhood and time together. Planning our marriages out with our Bratz dolls. I've never been good with friendship breakups, but this time I think I am. I think I'll be okay. Thank you all for listening to the rambles of this pregnant lady, who has also all enjoyed your ice cream recommendations. You have all expanded my horizons, and I'm sure the little one in my stomach appreciates it too. Now, for the next story. Am I the idiot for asking my husband's groomswoman to wear a wig or risk being uninvited from our wedding? My boyfriend, now fiancé, asked me to marry him 2 months ago. To give a little background, I met him at a farmer's market when I was 18 and he was 26. We're now 24F and 32M. We've been together for a little bit over 5 years and I'm very happy with him. Now to the story. My fiancé's friend, Brittany, has been friends with him since they were in elementary school. Throughout our early dating days, I expressed I was not a fan of this woman. There are many reasons as to why, such as us not having common interests and absolutely polar opposite moral codes, but the main one was her interest in embarrassing me and my fiancé, possibly because she likes him. When we were first starting to go on dates, she had shown up and tried to invite herself to the date, because he had told their mutual friend group chat, where he was taking me. She then decided that she would go to the same restaurant, and had tried to make a scene about him cheating on her, and that she was heartbroken. It escalated very quickly, and it ended with me asking the manager to get her trespassed, as she was delusional and I, nor my date, did not want her around. This sort of situation happened 3 more times, even going as far as showing up to his grandparents' house to stop me from meeting his family. At that point I made it clear to him that if anything like that were to happen again, I'd be out of there. Which he completely understood and agreed with me, wholeheartedly. He convinced his friend group to go low communication about Brittany with him because she was acting weird around him, and they all understood and disagreed with her actions. He had extremely low contact after that point, and I learned years later that she had gotten major therapy, even checked herself into a mental hospital, and went on medication to stop these absolutely unhinged personality traits. Around 4 years later they reconnected through a mutual friend's birthday party we were all at, and she genuinely seemed like she had changed personality-wise from the person I had met 5-ish years ago. We still didn't agree on most things, but she apologized for the way she had acted previously and owned up to all the BS she tried to pull with him. So, I just kept my guard up, but encouraged my fiancé to get friends with her again. I'm not friends with her, but I am friendly towards her. Skipping to now, I have been planning this wedding basically since I was born, over-exaggerating, but it has been in my thoughts since I was a young child. The wedding will not happen for another 2 years. The theme is supposed to be similar to D&D style fantasy. A Renaissance wedding with blue, orange, and red as the basic color scheme. Most of the wedding would be held outside at a local state park, but part of it would be held inside. Specifically, the cake and food would be cut and served inside, as well as some of the guest photos. This is the important part. I have a personal friend, Bride 28 female, who does professional pictures at Renaissance festivals across the US. Her job is to drive around across the country to Ren fairs and take pictures for certain venues. It's a very cool job, and I love seeing the pictures. However, she does editing for some of these venues with a green screen to make it look more aesthetic, or to totally change the scenery behind the people in the photo. For example, she showed me mock-ups for me in the past, showing silly people in costumes being chased by goblins and trolls, a dragon breathing fire behind a party of knights, and even a garden of lights with fairies flying through it, etc. It's silly stuff, and is for people to have fun with. My idea was to incorporate this into my wedding. The guests would choose whatever background they'd like from a catalog that my friend and I put together, and Briar, her teammate, would take pictures of them throughout the day. These pictures would be uploaded electronically and then be edited by her after the wedding. These were mandatory for all guests that wanted to participate so I could use the pictures for postcards and scrapbooking. It's my hobby. The people who wanted to take part in this activity would have to check a box on the save the date form I sent out. My assumption is that most guests would be doing this, as most of the people that will be invited are extremely rambunctious and love activities involving being silly. I do want to make it clear, these would not be the only pictures taken at the wedding. There still would be normal pictures being taken at the wedding itself, as well as photos that will likely be framed and used as decorations that would have no green screen of my husband and I, and the wedding party. A few days after he had proposed, my fiancé asked me if I'd feel comfortable with him inviting Brittany to the wedding as a groomswoman. Honestly, I was fine with it. Until the topic of her hair came up. In the year or so that he had reconnected, she cut and dyed her hair a lime green with a cool undertone and highlights. I honestly really like it and it suits her facial structure extremely well. However, I was worried about the green screen in her hair, so I invited her to my friend's home a while later so we could see if the screen would blend with her hair. Unfortunately, it did. In the pictures you could see a major glitch with every background we tried because of her hair. I asked my friend if there was a way to edit around it, and she said there was, but it would be an extra amount of money because it would be way more time to go through and possibly edit multiple photos of her, with groups of people and herself so the picture wouldn't glitch. I'm very against this, as our budget has to be semi-perfect. We are accounting for accidents and issues, but not extra money to my friend's business because of one woman's choice of dye blending very well with the green screen. While I do love her hair, I asked if she'd wear a wig to the wedding so she could still be included in the green screen pictures, even offered to get it professionally done, and I'd pay for that. This is when she became very angry with me. To sum up what she had said, her being asked to wear a wig was basically me saying I wanted to cover herself. That her hair was an expression of herself and that she loved it. I told her that I loved it as well, but in order for her to be included, she would need to wear a wig, as the green in her hair cannot just be covered up via a hat or other headwear. She has been saying that I just don't want to include her in the wedding. As a compromise against the wig, I proposed that she gets more pictures of her having fun taken at the wedding itself, instead of the green screen. She didn't like this idea because she claims it isn't fair all the other guests get to be put in a fun picture, and she's the only one not allowed. Though I sort of agree with her, it isn't to the fault of my own, so I offered that she paid for the extra editing costs it would be to take and edit more of her pictures. At first she was fine with the idea. Until I mentioned that the extra editing would cost around $100 for just a singular picture to be taken and edited by my friend, and the final price depended on how many photos she ended up in on the green screen. Then, she declined the offer and tried to throw it in my face that beer's prices were outrageous. I disagreed with her sentiment about the prices, and I haven't spoken to her since then. Throughout this whole ordeal, my fiancé has been on my side, but he has been upset over her possibly not being there. While he does agree with me about not wanting to pay more for just her, as well as that she's being overdramatic, he has sympathy for her being the only person being left out of this choice activity. While I also have sympathy, I just don't see an alternative here. We can't use a blue screen over a green screen, because the colors of the wedding are blue, red, and orange. And I don't wish to pay for a new screen for my friend's business, just because of one person. And the alternatives I have come up with, she has shot down. So my final decision was to ask him to disinvite her from the wedding to not create further drama, if she does not want to wear a wig. After long talks between us, he agreed with me and sent her a message that she would be disinvited entirely, and would be welcome to celebrate with just us, after our honeymoon had ended. They met up soon afterwards and he stayed firm on the matter, despite her crying and still refusing to do anything to correct her hair. She still believes that me asking her to do this is because of some power imbalance and that I just want to bully her, which I don't think I'm doing. She has a year to think it over. I can tell this situation bothers him though, and I've addressed it a few times. All of the times I have, he says it is for the best, as she would just ruin the photos she was in with the green screen, and could cost us to delete hundreds of pictures, purely based on her actions. I agree. But it still bothers me that I'm doing something wrong. Especially since after this incident, her mom and dad have reached out to me to scold me for abusing my power against their daughter on one of the biggest parties she's ever been invited to. Even my friends are split on the issue. All of them having sympathy for her, but some of them saying I'm in awe, because I won't just let her come to the wedding and have someone to block her from taking any pictures with the green screen. And, just to make sure the record is straight, I am not trying to force her to change her hair in any way. I do not want her to dye it differently, nor would I expect her to. I purely just want a non-green wig to be put on her head for the wedding and then she can remove it afterwards. I would normally say that she could remove it after the green screen portion. But I'm still working out if I'm just going to let it stay up for the entire day of the wedding. Or if I'm going to hold other activities for everyone, and have Bri close the photo stuff down. Again, wedding isn't for another 2 years, so I'm able to think it over for at least a year. Comments. Comment 1. Maybe it's because I'm not planning to ever get married in some sort of super fancy event, and also because I hate going to hair salons, but I'm just so confused by the whole wedding plan 2 years in advance to this extent thing. And also by the hair color being an issue now when the wedding is going to be in 2 years. As well as Brittany apparently already having booked salon appointments for the next 2 years to touch up her hair color. Comment 2. Everyone here is a mess. Brittany is obviously the biggest mess, but honestly Oop and her partner are kinda messy too. Like the age gap is dubious, especially since she was 18 when they started dating. The fact that the partner didn't immediately stop Brittany's antics the first time she showed up on their dates is insane. I would have immediately cut a friend off for pulling that shit. It's very obvious she is a deeply sick individual and being around Oop's partner is not good for her, and yet they let her back in anyway. And all this fuss over a wedding that is 2 years away seems a bit much. I understand Oop is excited, but it sounds exhausting. Update. I honestly didn't think I'd post an update at all this year, because I mostly got the confirmation I needed to know I was mostly correct in my assumption that she'd cause more drama at the wedding than necessary, and that I'd be correct in that I would be okay to disinvite her. I was trying to be detailed in that post, but in this one I'm going to be a little less detailed. Basically 3 days ago I was sent my post on Messenger from Brittany. She is a notorious Reddit lurker, apparently, and saw it a few hours after it was posted. It didn't even have to get multiple upvotes because she just reads the ones available on the recent category. I told her I posted because I had a lot of inner conflict towards my involvement with my fiancé's choosing to disinvite her if she can't just make some form of sacrifice to not be in the green screen wear a wig so she can be included. She got extremely mad at me, called me names, threatened that I'd be sued for defamation, etc. This honestly just made me realize how little she actually changed. Of course I showed my fiancé and he was appalled at her actions. He said he was going to block her and did so that day, and so did I. Yesterday I woke up to 43 missed calls from a number I did not recognize. That ended up to be her and a dozen voicemails claiming that I was stealing my fiancé away from her again, that I had purposefully targeted her for just wanting to be included with everyone else, and so on. I do not know how she got my number, but I obviously blocked it. After that I reported her to the police on the non-emergency line, because I didn't know if I would be needing to fear for my safety. I'm really glad I did this. After my fiancé had left for work, she showed up to our home and knocked on the door. I cracked a window near the door and asked what she wanted. She said whilst crying, that I needed to let her in the house because it was her right to be with my fiancé, not me. She started kicking at the door and I told her to knock it off. Immediately, I just started dialing the non-emergency police number for my nearest precinct, because I already knew what was happening in that moment. And I was supposed to be clocking in for work on my computer at that moment. I texted my boss and she excused my absence for the day as well. As I was doing this, I kept repeating, "Go away. I called the police, and I do not want you here. You're trespassing." She was saying all kinds of things I don't wish to repeat here, but the lesser of the things she was saying involved calling me a white racist pig. She is mixed race, and so am I. Saying she was 8 months pregnant with my fiancé's baby. There's quite literally zero proof of this, including no baby bump, despite being a fairly thin woman. Screaming that she would take me to hell. Trying to break my metal outside door, but instead hurting herself instead. And so on. Basically she had a full-on meltdown. The police came, saw that was trying to break my door down, and immediately put her in cuffs and sat her down. She was claiming this was her house, and that she'd lived there for 10 years, that I had broken in and locked her out, etc. Of course, because of her psychotic appearance, I was questioned and once given the real story. As well as being able to provide proof that I was the owner of the home, she was taken to the police station. As far as I'm aware, she was booked for the night, and was let go today. I did agree to a temporary no-contact order, and my fiancé and I are going to proceed with a permanent one. Her parents called after they heard she was put in a holding cell, and apologized profusely. Apparently Brittany had lied to them about the extent of her actions and downplayed a lot of it. On the exterior she seemed fine and well-rounded. But mentally she had snapped again from not taking her meds for a year. She never told her parents this, just acted normally until one of her triggers came back. My fiancé. No. He didn't do anything wrong, she just had a major trigger when it came to him, because of a deeply obsessive personality disorder. I wasn't trying to air her dirty laundry about her medical history the last post, but she was diagnosed with BPD and a large handful of disorders caused by trauma she had endured in her childhood from her great-grandfather. She's an unhealthy person, and I regret even allowing her to have the notion that we had forgiven her for her past. I'm pretty shaken from this ordeal. And I can't believe this was all because of a goddamn green screen and some pictures that were supposed to just be treated as silly holiday cards for my foreseeable future. This is making me rethink the idea altogether, to be completely honest. Maybe I'll just rent an adult bouncy house because that seems more fun than green screen professional photography. Now, for the next story. Am I the idiot for refusing to go to confession, even though it means I won't be able to take communion at my brother's wedding? I, 31 female, have 3 siblings, 40 male, 38 female, 27 male, and we have a good relationship despite the age gaps between some of us. My older siblings are both married and so am I. The wedding in question is my younger brother's. My younger brother Luke is engaged to his GF of a year, Emma, 28 female. She is nice, I guess, but we have never really clicked and are just polite to each other. Something important is that we are all Catholic but not really hardcore ones, and some of us are even lapsed. I do believe this whole situation started just when I met her for the first time. I look younger than Luke, and it has always been a sibling joke that I am truly the baby of the family. Most people that meet us assume he is older than me, but nobody has had issues with it until Emma. The day I met her, she kind of scoffed when I said I was happy the baby had a proper girlfriend. She has this weird thing about being the eldest in her family, and refused to believe I was older than her, until I showed her my ID. She has been hot and cold with me since then, often infantilizing me or trying to have a sort of boss attitude. I just let her be, and usually ignore her since I have no time to try and beg for her friendship, so I am just polite and civil, always include her when planning stuff but don't really make an effort. The family knows about it, but we just shrugged it to different personalities. Then the wedding planning started. Emma decided I could not be in the wedding party since I was not married in a church. Fine by me. Then she requested that immediate family submits their dress planning so she could check it fits the wedding dress code. Fine, whatever. You see where this is going, I hope? You'll see I have not gone to confession, or have communion in more than a decade. If I go to a mass for whatever reason, I am respectful, and simply sit, or stay standing during the rites I don't participate on. Well, this is not good enough for her, and she says I need to take communion during their wedding. I said no, and she has not taken it well. For the most part, avoid her, as I said before. But this time I wasn't going to say yes or risk an issue. I told her for taking communion one needs to go to confession, and I didn't want to. She said all immediate family is doing it, and it will look bad if I don't. I told her sure, fine, then I'll just go have communion in front of everybody but won't do confession. She said if this was going to be my attitude, I was uninvited from the wedding because I clearly wanted to ruin the day for her. I turned to my brother and told him thanks, gave him a thumbs up, and went home. My family understand my reasoning and said they respect everybody's choices, but I shouldn't have said what I said. I told them I really don't want to go to the wedding anymore, and I don't owe Emma explanations on my life. I only called my grandma because she heard what happened, and asked me not to disrespect the church by doing the communion without confession. I promised I wouldn't do it, and she is fine with me now. I got a text from my brother wanting to compromise, so I replied by asking if the other lapsed people are being made to take confession too. He said no because it was only nuclear family members. I find it funny since all the others are clearly older than her, and she just behaves like this with me and the youngsters. Comments. Comment 1. Every time I see disagreements like this, where the significant other drives a wedge between family over ridiculous request, it's a huge "this is what the rest of Luke's life is going to be like, and he should reconsider marrying this woman." Comment 2. As one of 5 children in a large Irish Catholic extended family, there's a lot of red flags here, and they don't all belong to Luke and the fiancée. Their behavior and actions are obviously unacceptable, but I get the feeling that Op has a much rosier perspective of their family and Luke's experience within the family. Grandma calling Luke his fiancée's lapdog and calling said fiancée a crazy woman definitely did not help the situation, and if you have to explain that so-and-so is the oldest grandson but grandma still loves all her grandchildren, then maybe there's some truth to the oldest being favored. I also noticed that Op said her parents and grandmother tried to always be there, so I think Luke had some valid complaints that Op chose not to share in order to fit her narrative. Anyway, I think this is more of an Ash situation, and I hope all members of the family have happier lives apart. Update 1. I would like to clear something I kept seeing in the comments. I won't request a special blessing or go in the queue for communion. It isn't about the blessing or the compromise but the singling me out. I often just stay quiet or take a general family blessing if we go to weddings, etc. I have no issue with compromises. I have an issue with Emma and her ridiculousness. I don't know why she has this thing with me. I do look young but not like a teen or a child, obviously. She has 2 younger sisters and is very authoritative with them. I have witnesses her being very my way or the highway with younger people, so she has issues for sure. The confrontation from the last post was on Tuesday and today we had lunch at my grandma's. I think you should also know that my brothers have a tricky relationship, as in they are not as close with each other as they are with other siblings. My older brother Robert is very no-nonsense and he has never been a fan of Emma, but he didn't think he should have to intervene because Luke is an adult and capable of navigating relationships. All this is going to be relevant, I promise. We visit Grandma a lot since she lives by herself and we truly enjoy her company. Today we were all there because she is over this drama already. After a lunch that was more like snacking, to be honest, she asked us all to clear the air. Emma continued with her rant about me being a disrespectful person, and that she was asking the bare minimum from me. My grandma asked her why she had no issue with her not taking communion, and Emma said that she was her elder and for sure her reasons were more than a tantrum like it was in my case. She also repeated that she was asking this of all the siblings and I was the only one that was being difficult with her tiny request. This is where everything crumbled for her. I mentioned in the comments that Robert is also lapsed and he was already exhausted by this situation. He asked her why she had no issues with him not taking communion and she looked like a kid that was caught. She didn't have a proper answer. Robert then asked her if she even knew why he and Grandma became lapsed. She shook her head and looked at Luke for help. Luke on the other hand was staring angrily at Robert and I but said nothing. Robert explained to Emma he was the reason Grandma became lapsed. When Robert was a teen he came out as gay, and was so worried about our grandparents' reaction since they were very active in the Catholic Church. Grandma felt awful about it, and even worse when she went and spoke about this with the then priest of her church. That priest was super old school, and told her that Robert was committing sins, he was going to hell, he needed to find his way, the whole 9 yards. Grandma didn't take that so well and simply stopped going to church, and started spending that time with her grandchildren. Over the years she started getting into the whole community again, but she decided she was done taking the sacraments. She respects parts of the church but can't fully reconcile with it. Emma was a bit confused since Robert is married to a woman, and he explained he is bisexual, and ended up with a woman just as he could have ended with a man. He also commented they are not married in the church, but that didn't matter to her like it mattered when it came to me. He asked her directly what was her problem with me. Long story short, she said I was rude since the beginning and kept treating Luke wrong. Oh, and I also was very snarky about looking younger than her. Crickets. She is a beautiful, successful woman, so I still don't understand her obsession, but it seems like she wants people to see I respect her, and what she says. I just started laughing. She started crying and saying I turned my grandma against her. My grandma told her to stop blaming people for her being a negative person, and she was always going to side with me over her. Luke got upset at that, and asked her why she was not supporting him, and she simply said she doesn't support him being a lapdog for a crazy woman. More was said, nothing got truly resolved. I was kind of invited again but declined going. Grandma is undecided if she even wants to go at all. My older siblings told Luke they will go to the ceremony if he seeks couples therapy or at least therapy. My parents are having headaches and now dislike Emma so much they can't hide it. Oh. And yes, Grandma spoke with the priest and he wants them to do extra premarital counseling or he won't officiate. I hope they don't get married, but he is old enough to derail his life if he wants. I thank you for letting me vent, and my grandma loved the Pope joke. Update 2. My brother has gone too far and I decided to be done with him. He made our grandma cry and I think permanently damaged a lot of his relationships. I want to mention some of my cousins and other family members thought I was just stubborn and creating drama, but now there is no longer my side or Emma's side. Maybe he always felt this way, but the issue he has with Robert is absolutely ridiculous. He was so upset with what Grandma said about him being Emma's lapdog that he called her to speak about it. I was obviously not present for the conversation, but Grandma told me what happened, and Luke confirmed it. He told her that it was unfair of me to ask Robert for help since he was her favorite grandchild, and would get her to side with me no matter how wrong I was. He also told her that many of the cousins believed this, and that it was so obvious since she even left her religion for him. He claimed the other LGBTQ members of the family, most were not even born when Robert came out, by the way, doubted if she would do it for them. So Grandma explained to Luke, and then call every single one of her grandchildren to ask them how they felt, and explain to each a part we didn't know. She said that when Robert came out, as she spoke with the old priest, he hinted about knowing of places to set Robert straight. Grandma had heard horror stories from these places and so had Robert, and they both spoke with my parents together about that not being an option at all. My parents never intended to send Robert there and are very casual Catholics, but Grandma wanted to cover the bases just in case. I was told Grandma sounded like she had been crying on the phone, and after the first couple of calls, which went from oldest to youngest, the group chat started to blow. Robert is livid. Our LGBTQ cousins are livid and say Luke lied. Even the cousins that were telling me to stop being a stubborn head are livid. By the time I was up for my call, I was already on the way to Grandma's. 2 of my cousins were already there, and the youngest one, Sarah 16F, was ready to literally fight Luke. For a bit of levity, Sarah is about 35 cm smaller than Luke, and the image of her swinging at him made me laugh a bit. She asked if I was making fun of her, and I just explained the whole mental image of her trying to hit him, and she admitted it was kind of funny. What I didn't tell her is I would love to slap some sense into Luke. My grandma has been through so much in her life, and this is not what we want for her. She looks puffy-faced and kept asking everybody if they truly felt unloved by her, saying she would do everything for any of us. Explaining how Robert was the oldest grandchild, but that didn't mean she loved the rest any less. She is a strong woman, but I think something inside her broke a little with the thought she hurt her grandchildren. It was a sideshow, a big one, and I was just so done with Luke. My parents have been passive towards the situation so far because I asked them to, but after they heard what happened, they told him they need time away from him. Robert is simply disgusted and decided to not speak with him anymore, which he communicated through the cousin group chat, with Luke's response being that this is why Emma's help on reining all us would be so beneficial if we just let her. He also added how Robert never cared for him or anybody really, and he just tried to be the center of attention all the time. He cited his coming out, his announcement he was going to marry a woman, the birth of his child. It was ridiculous. He came out when Luke was a toddler, and for many years only our parents and grandparents knew. He announced he was going to marry his now wife through a text, but didn't interfere, or took from anybody. His child was born 4 months before Luke's graduation, and apparently that was a big issue for Luke that he never commented. Maybe I am biased, maybe I am selfish like Emma claims, but I call bullshit on his tantrum. Every single one of the cousins has been helped, babysat, tutored, gotten out of trouble, you name it, by Robert. He isn't perfect, but he isn't the conniving ass Luke is claiming. Maybe Luke has always felt inadequate, and we didn't notice. Maybe it was his last-ditch effort. Maybe Emma has manipulated him so far that he can't come back. It doesn't matter anymore. If he does marry Emma, I wish him the best. If he doesn't, I hope he goes to therapy. Regardless of what he decides, he burns so many bridges and hurts so many people. I don't see this resolving anytime soon. For now, I will focus on my grandma and making her feel better. I feel extremely guilty, because it was Emma's situation with me that opened this can of worms. I know I shouldn't, but it's hard not to. Update 3. I want to start this by saying that Grandma is in better spirits now. I am overwhelmed by the amount of people supporting her, and very grateful for it, even if it's online. I have talked about this on some chats and DMs, but please know the situation with Emma is not about her being prettified or her family being strict Catholics, it's just her being her. They were already going to get premarital counseling and extra was added. Oh, all cousins also don't live in the same city or town, some are a bit longer than others, but we keep in touch through the chat. The reason for the update is mainly to let people know Grandma is okay, her health is fine, and she had a blast with my cousin Sarah. I also want to update on what has happened with the cousins and the maternal side of our family. Some of our paternal cousins from Grandma's side have relented and feel a bit bad on excluding Luke from things, so the compromise was met on he can be invited to everything. Just don't force people to interact. These cousins are mainly on the older side and have soft spots for the youngsters. My youngest cousin, Sarah, said she was okay with it all, but she wanted them to keep him away from her since she can't stand him anymore. Our maternal side was a sideshow, because of course we need one. Some of them were very upset, but others told me I should try to understand where he was coming from. My mom was the one that told them everything, and some told her she is at fault for making Robert the star of the family. This was so uncalled for, but brought some issues in my family, particularly when one of my maternal cousins asked me if I could behave enough if I am seated at the same table as Luke for his wedding. It makes us doubt ourselves, but really this is a cousin that Robert has bailed from almost bankruptcy 2 times, and he's the problem. I haven't said much about my sister Lucy since she voiced nothing different before. She was always very close to Luke and even had a great relationship with Emma before the debacle. She decided to be out of it because she was so disappointed. While she was never made to babysit or anything like that, she was always so into Luke since he was her baby brother. She loved him the most, and I know that because she literally told me when I was a kid. We have a good relationship now because her kids are my buddies, but it was rough for a while before that. She was upset about the whole thing, but when our maternal family, or at least a part, started excusing Luke, she lost it. She is a very calm person, the type you don't expect a bad word out of, but she lost it, and I think it was the last straw in the cold bucket for Luke. She sent a massive message about what has been happening, detailing every single thing, and daring people to kind of come at her if they disagreed. She made sure to include every single nasty thing, every bad word, every eye roll. She sent it to so many people because she was tired of the half-information telephone game. She is upset at me because my refusals made this happen, and she said she knows she shouldn't, but she needs time to fix her feelings, so she is not speaking with me right now. My parents decided they were out of the wedding and told Luke he is on his own. There was never a monetary issue. They were willing to contribute, but both Luke and Emma are pretty well off, and was no need for that. Now to what maybe most people want to know, and the only conflict I am interested about anymore. My grandma is feeling better. Sarah being with her was very positive. It was lovely to see the eldest and youngest of our family so in tune, but then again they have always been. She requested that Sarah invited Luke to her birthday party December, and after a lot of back and forward he is going to be invited. We will see if he comes or not. A small parenthesis, I showed my grandma the joke of the knife sword at CC, she was so giddy. Thank you. I mentioned before that Robert would pick up Sarah if she needed. It is still true. What I might have not mentioned is that she of course gets a weird lecture from him, and an even weirder lecture on how he rates certain drugs. LOL, as I said. He is no saint, but he is not a shit either. Lastly, yes, he has photos even with my sister or me in the newborn wall. People love to take pics of him holding the new family members, and he collected them and put them together when he got his own house. Now, for the next story. My husband asked for a divorce but changed his mind just hours later, and now a year has passed since that moment. We've been together for 2 years, married for 1. We're both in our early 20s. The night of the bullshit we'd had an argument about the distribution of chores that I think triggered it. I thought it wasn't fair that I was doing the majority of the housework, on top of being a full-time student at university and having a job. He seemed to think the chore distribution was fair, and that I was overreacting. We came to a solution after all the bullshit I'm about to tell you about occurred, but essentially I was feeling overwhelmed and unheard, and he was feeling stressed and confused as to why I thought this was a problem. Later that night we're discussing the situation again, and I express how it feels like he's not listening to me and how distant he's been lately. Then he says there's a reason for the distance, and I ask him to tell me why. He says that he thinks we move too fast, he doesn't know who he is, and he wants a divorce. He says he cares about me but doesn't love me, and that he's been feeling this way for a while. Now I've promised myself since years ago that I would never try to make someone stay with me if they don't want to. So as much as this hurt, I said okay. I cried. He cried. I did ask if he wanted to try couples therapy before divorcing, but he said no. We decided to sort out details in the morning. I grabbed some blankets to sleep on the couch and he went upstairs to bed. In the midst of my sitting on the couch crying and looking up apartments, what felt like hours later, I hear him get up and come to the living room. He sits down next to me and just says I fucked up so bad. I freeze when I hear this, because I've barely processed the reality of what just happened and I can already see where he's going next. I ask him to elaborate, and he says he doesn't want a divorce. That he doesn't know why he said that, and he's feeling the most regret he's ever experienced in his life. He says that he realizes he fucked up, and I don't have to take him back. At this point I've experienced so much emotional whiplash that I've completely numbed out. I'd already cried all the tears I could. Now I was just sitting there next to my sobbing husband, and saying I'd take him back even though I'd barely processed the fact that he'd wanted to divorce me. I told him I wanted couples counseling and for him to get individual therapy, and he agreed. I've asked him about individual therapy in the past, but he never wanted to until now. It's days later now. I've gone through all the stages of being mad at him, depressed that my marriage almost ended, insecure about myself, accepting the reality, feeling love for him, feeling numb, cycling through all these emotions over and over again, at random. We're searching for a couples counselor, but a lot of them have wait list right now. So in the meantime I just want to know, if anyone has been in a similar situation, does it get better? Does the trust ever come back? I feel like I can't trust him at all now. When he touches me I freak out sometimes, because that's not the comforting feeling I'm used to when he touches me. It's the feeling like he's suffocating me. I want to be here for him and help him through whatever mental shit he's going through. But this has been affecting my work and my school. I left my dream school for him. I can't just keep prioritizing him above everything else when he clearly doesn't do the same for me. And yet until now he was doing the same for me. He's always been so sweet, buying me flowers, making dinner, going out of his way to make time for us. And before you scream abuse, please know I've been in abusive relationships before, and they felt nothing like this. He's not like those guys, this is the first time he's ever done something like this. I just don't know how we can recover. Any advice about how to get through this would be appreciated. Husband asked for a divorce, then changed his mind hours later. I don't know how to ever trust him again. Comments. Comment 1. Personally, I think you need to be single and work on yourself. If you got married a year into your relationship, that means you were engaged within just a few months of knowing him. Now you're sobbing over this man and taking him back in the same breath 2 hours after he said it was over. Also, just because he regrets what he said doesn't mean he didn't mean it. There was definitely truth behind his statement, we got married too fast. There seems to be a lot of codependency in this relationship on both sides. Comment 2. I find it so fascinating that she describes what was her trigger for leaving his friend telling him what she'd asked him, then him confronting her about it, which left her terrified of him. And he doesn't seem to even think to mention that incident, even though it happened the night before she left. Like, I wonder if he's just that clueless to how he came off? Is it just the unreliable narrative? He left it out to make himself not look abusive. Didn't work, by the way. I mean, I definitely have had a very different perspective of certain incidents than some of the men in my life. But come on. How do you not see that as abusive behavior? Edit. 8 months ago, my 23F husband, 25M, asked for a divorce, then changed his mind hours later. We went to couples therapy and individual therapy, though he quit his individual therapy after just a couple sessions, claiming he'd look for a new therapist, and never did. We've worked through a lot of our issues, we've become better partners to each other. But despite all our improvements, my mind keeps going back to that moment. I find myself constantly monitoring his emotions, looking into his eyes to try to see if he's still in there, or if they're vacant like they were that day. I completely shut down around his friends because I saw the text conversation he had with his best friend the day of, and how they shit-talked me. My husband swears his best friend doesn't hate me, but I don't believe him. I live my life in constant fear that today is going to be the day he changes his mind again and leaves me. I've become obsessive about saving money in my personal account so that if he does leave, I'll be okay. I find myself apologizing for everything, making myself small. I hate this version of myself. I feel like a coward. Last night we had a fight about it, because I asked for reassurance and he got upset. He said he's been trying so hard, but that no matter what he does, it feels like it will never be good enough. And honestly, he might be right. He really has been trying so hard, and has been such a good partner these past few months, but I can't get what he did out of my head. I've tried to explain so many times in so many ways how much what he did hurt me and how it's going to take time to heal. His response last night, good people make mistakes, get over it. So I decided that the pain of bringing it up again and again, and again, and hurting him in the process wasn't worth it. I told him I'd stop talking about it and try to forgive him. I feel like I've just made the ultimate betrayal to myself. I stopped individual therapy a bit ago to save money. But the combination of last night plus the fact that I feel compelled to post on Reddit about this probably means I should go back. I fantasize about going back to my dream school, running away, just leaving all of this behind. I hate that I gave up my dream life for a man who maybe doesn't even want me, and that I'm stuck playing the part of the good quiet wife who shuts up for the sake of protecting his image. I hate what I've become. It's hard to see a way out. Update. 1 year ago, I 24F made this post asking for advice on how to continue with my relationship after my now ex-husband 26M betrayed my trust by telling me he wanted a divorce out of the blue, and then changing his mind just a couple hours later. As stated above, he is now my ex. Those of you who said that he would repeat the same behavior again, you were right. On New Year's Day 2024, he said he wanted a divorce, packed a bag and left to a motel, then came back hours later. I'll admit, I was a wreck that day. I asked him if this was just going to be like last time and he said no. I asked him if he felt mentally okay and he said he felt fine. I got on my knees and begged this man to stay, not my proudest moment, and he looked at me with empty, vacant eyes and just left. I was in tears for a couple hours, but then I opened this app to try to distract myself and saw he had made a now deleted please don't go looking for his account post on the divorce subreddit about how he left me and felt bad, but didn't regret it. Then I went from depressed to furious. I called my landlord and told him that I was getting a divorce and needed his help in changing the locks. My landlord was very understanding and helped me do so. A few hours later I heard a knock on the door, and when I opened it my ex-husband was standing there. I didn't even get a chance to tell him to leave, because he immediately collapsed into my arms sobbing. The first coherent words to come out of his mouth were, "You're not going to take me back, are you?" Reddit, I would love to say that I rejected him right then, but I didn't. Even after all of this, I was still hooked into his web of manipulation. So instead I sat down with him, and had a long discussion about how much he hurt me. How in the middle of working to rebuild the trust that had been broken between us, he completely destroyed any progress that had been made, and found a way to make that distrust even worse. I don't remember the details of what he said, but he always knew what to say to get me to feel sorry for him. The night ended with me saying I would take him back. He was smiling, saying he'd never felt so hopeful. He wrote me a love poem that night for the first time in years. Meanwhile, I had never felt so broken, and I told him that after he said he felt so hopeful. He shrugged it off and said I'd feel better in the morning. I did not, in fact, feel better in the morning. During the next few days, while I was trying to pick myself back up, study for finals, and continue going to work as if nothing was wrong, he went back and forth every day on whether or not he loved me, whether or not he wanted to be married to me. He said he thought he loved the idea of being a husband more than he loved me. My last straw was when I reached out to one of his childhood friends, who I had interacted with a few times and though I could trust to be honest with me, and asked him if he had ever noticed any red flags in my ex-husband's behavior in his past relationships, or behavior towards women in general. This friend assured me that he had never noticed anything of the sort. I thanked him and asked if he could please not tell ex-husband I asked that, since I was afraid of what he might do. When my ex-husband came home from work that day, I could immediately tell he knew. He opened the front door so forcefully. He sat down on the couch next to me, told me he knew, and said in a low and almost growling tone of voice, "But I know you didn't mean any harm by it." I was frozen in fear and couldn't say anything. But then he grabbed my face and turned my head to look at him, and his eyes looked so cold. And he said again, "You didn't mean any harm by it, right?" I nodded and forced myself to answer right. And I knew in that moment this man would kill me if I didn't find a way out of this relationship. If I didn't kill myself first with how bad my mental health was getting after dealing with him insulting and belittling me day after day. I was genuinely starting to spiral into a dark place I hadn't been to in years. The next day while he was at work, I packed a bag, wrote a note telling him I'm leaving, and that I want his stuff out of the house when I get back, left the note on the counter with my ring, and spent the night at my mom's. It is an uncontested divorce, filing by mail, and should be finalized in April. I started the paperwork at my mom's house that first night of separation. Since ending my relationship, I have gone to therapy and realized just how abusive and manipulative my ex-husband was. I also understand how broken he is, but being mentally unwell is not an excuse for abusive behavior. What he did to me was abuse, and I'm not afraid to say that anymore. I have reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I have started doing things that I love again. Things he never wanted me to do, like wearing red lipstick or eating mint-flavored things and going to concerts. I've realized I never want to be married again. I've discovered my polyamorous identity and have begun to explore this side of myself. I have plans to move out of my hated hometown that he had dragged me back to. I feel so much more joy, freedom, and self-love than I ever did when I was in a relationship with my ex-husband. I won't be using this account anymore after this, as I have no need to. But I want to thank this community and the other Reddit subs that I've participated in. If I had never made my original post, I don't think I would have realized just how awfully my ex-husband treated me. Thanks to the support of hundreds of voices telling me I deserve better, I realized how true that statement was. I deserve better, and now I have better. I also want this update to be a beacon of hope to anyone who has found themselves in a similarly emotionally, verbally abusive situation. Life is so much better when you leave. There is hope, there is light on the other side of the pain. Update 2. I know I'll probably come off as the villain, but I need to get this out. I destroyed my marriage and I still don't even know why. I'm in my 20s, so is my ex-wife. We had this fast summer romance. It was my first relationship that ever got serious. She wanted to go to college in another country, and I didn't want to lose her, so I said I'd go with her. Maybe that's where I first fucked up. Turns out getting a work visa when you don't know the language is pretty much impossible, and so the only way I could go with her was if we got married. She asked if I would marry her, and I said yes. At the time I thought we would be getting married someday anyways, so why not shorten the timeline a bit? I really did love her. I want to emphasize this because my actions later on admittedly did not reflect that. We had a small wedding. I've never been one for fancy things, and she said she'd rather spend the money on our future than some elaborate party. She spent months searching for an apartment for us in the country she'd be studying in, but ultimately we had to decide on her going alone first, when the school year started, and me staying in our home country while she continued to search for a place for us to stay. This was rough, and honestly I couldn't stop imagining her finding someone new or going out to college parties the way all the movies show, and finding someone she wanted more than me. It's always been an insecurity of mine, especially because she's bi and some things she'd say sometimes made me wonder if she'd like being with a woman more. Long story short, she ended up getting sick and we decided she should come back home and continue her studies here. She got really depressed after coming back home. She didn't want to go out because she didn't want to run into people we knew. She felt like she'd failed in her goals. I tried to help her get back on her feet, but she was just so in her head and I just couldn't stand it sometimes. Something had shifted then. She got angry with me a lot. We'd get into fights and I hated it, because I'm not a person who gets angry, ever. She said I didn't do my fair share of chores. Got upset whenever I'd spend too much time gaming and not enough attention on her. It was like I had to be this perfect picture of me she had in her head, otherwise I was a monster. One night it got really bad. I had said I was going to do the dishes and I honestly just forgot. I was going to do them after one more round of COD with the boys, but I forgot. And as we were going to bed, she turned and saw the dishes in the sink and started screaming at me. I was already tired and I had work in the morning and honestly couldn't be bothered. She stomped downstairs and did them, and I'm pretty sure she intentionally made as much noise as possible so I couldn't even sleep until she was done. The next day while I was at work I decided I was done. It was like some sort of switch just flipped in my brain. I didn't want to go on being treated like this. I'd seen this kind of stuff play out with my own parents, and I didn't want to be miserable like them. So when I got home I sat her down and told her I wanted a divorce. She seemed surprised, which I thought was strange because from my end it seemed like we were both unhappy. She took it pretty well though. We had a long conversation about our feelings and stuff and decided that I'd take the bed and she'd take the couch and we'd sort out details in the morning. She asked if I was sure, if I wanted to try therapy first, and I was so sure that this was what I wanted. It was rough. Laying upstairs in our bed I was still able to hear her sobbing, but I was so sure this was what was best for both of us. Then I don't even know how to describe it. It was like a switch flipped in my head again, and I started imagining what my life would be like without her. The morning coffees and kisses, the way she always remembered my birthday my family forgets every year, her constant encouragement. Seeing her smile. Then my mind flashed to how broken she looked when I told her we were done, and I cannot even begin to describe the stab in the heart I felt when I realized I had just hurt the person I loved most in this world. I knew I couldn't live without her, and I'd do anything to make her smile again. So I went downstairs. It was still late at night. I don't know how much time had passed, and watched her try to wipe away her tears and try to look put together as I sat down next to her. I didn't even know what to say. The first thing I could think of was I fucked up so bad. She set down her laptop and I saw it was open to some apartment search site. She asked me what I meant, and I told her I still loved her, that I didn't know why I said everything that I did and I don't deserve any sort of forgiveness, but could we please try again? And this saint of a woman held me in her arms as I broke down crying and forgave me. She said she wanted couples therapy, which I instantly agreed to. I would have agreed to anything she wanted if it meant staying together. The next day was rough. She was starting her new job. I had terrible timing, I know, and she wouldn't even undress in front of me. She went into the bathroom to change clothes. There was no kiss goodbye before work, no kiss hello after. She wouldn't even look me in the eyes. This went on for a while. It was a full week before she let me have sex with her. And things did slowly start to get better, but she was never fully the same. The fun-loving woman I fell in love with was gone. It's like the light in her eyes had gone out. I tried everything I could. I went to the therapy sessions. I bought her flowers. Planned date nights, went out of my way to get her favorite chocolate, listened to the books she wanted about emotional labor, and I even created a chore chart, so the housework could even out. And some days she'd be fine, but there were a lot of nights when I'd wake up to hear her crying in bed next to me. If I tried to comfort her, she'd just push me away and say she was fine. So at some point I stopped trying and just lay there and listened to her trying to stifle her sobs and wonder how many nights she was doing this. Other times she'd get angry. Any mistake I made, she'd always find a way to tie it back to how I abandoned her. It was like nothing I could ever do would be enough. I'd always be the monster who made her feel unloved. One of the worst gut punches was when I realized she'd changed her phone background from a photo of us to a bunch of photos of her friends. I asked her why she changed it and she said she just felt like it. My background stayed as a picture of her, until the very last day. After months of this back and forth trying to please her, and one too many nights of listening to her crying in bed, I looked through her phone and saw something she'd written about how she felt trapped in our marriage. The next day I told her I wanted a divorce, that I knew she was unhappy and I was too, and this is what was best for both of us. I went further this time, packed a bag and went to a hotel, turned off my location. She acted different this time. The first time she was calm, self-assured, said she wasn't going to beg for me. But this time was different. She was hysterical. literally got on her knees begging me to stay. It was really unlike her. I was honestly a little worried for her safety. But I left anyways. Hopped online, told the boys it was over, tried to distract myself with gaming because it's the only thing that keeps me sane. Eventually I logged off and just lay in the hotel bed listening to music trying to fall asleep. And a song came on that meant something to our relationship, and it was like something broke in me. I couldn't stop crying. I ran to the car and drove back home sobbing and speeding. I'm not sure how I didn't crash. When I got there I tried to unlock the door and the key wouldn't fit. She'd changed the locks already. I had to knock on the door of my own home and the waiting seemed to last forever. I know it sounds pathetic, but as soon as she opened the door I just collapsed into her. I was crying so much I nearly hyperventilated. She was standing really still, she didn't say anything and her arms were flat by her side, and I could tell she wasn't going to take me back as time. After I pulled myself together I saw a bunch of trash bags by the table and knew it was probably my things. I asked her if she'd take me back. She hesitated for a while before saying she'd have to think about it. We had a long talk, a good talk, about our whole relationship and everything that had happened. Somehow I managed to convince her that we could give another try. I had gone from feeling so empty that morning to feeling so hopeful by the nighttime. I felt like this time really would be different. I started writing again. She even let me have sex with her that night, rather than waiting a week like last time. She said she felt broken, and was saying some scary shit about wanting to kill herself, but she's always been a bit melodramatic, so I knew she'd come around. I fell asleep dreaming of a better life for us. But the next few days were hell. I woke up realizing that after I'd fallen asleep she'd put her clothes back on and slept on the floor. She would barely eat. Everything she did seemed robotic, and every night I'd have to pull her away from the knives and pills because she kept saying things about how she didn't want to live. One night it got really bad. She was crying in bed as usual, and when I asked her what was wrong she started begging me to kill her, saying I was a coward for killing her soul and leaving her body here to suffer. I was really scared for both of us. I managed to talk her down somehow, and the next morning I came home to a note on the counter saying she was staying at her mother's, and she wanted me out of here by the week's end. She left her ring on the note, so I knew she was serious, and honestly I was just glad it wasn't a suicide note. So I took the rest of my things and left. We've interacted a few times since then to get papers sorted, and now the divorce is final. From what I can tell she seems happy. I guess she's moving soon and maybe has a new guy, I can't tell. I try not to look at her things. For the life of me I can't figure out why I did it. She's telling people I was abusive. Maybe I was. My father seems to think I'm in the right, which makes me feel icky, because he's a misogynist prick. I loved her, I really did. And I'm starting to realize just how much she did for me. My apartment's a mess without her. My life's a mess, I keep forgetting shit, because she's not here to remind me. I have a toothache but keep forgetting to make an appointment because she was always the one to do that, and I don't even think I have dental insurance anyways. I miss my dog, I miss her. I miss having someone to come home and vent to, and she was always so understanding of me. I took her for granted. And now she's off to some foreign country, probably fucking her ex or something. And I'm stuck here away from my family and friends working my ass off in a 9-5 with nothing to show for it.